Henry Mason stood in the dimming glow of the evening sun, the dry rustle of leaves the only sound in the still air.
Ow.
His weathered hands, scarred from decades of honest work, trembled slightly as he unfolded the thick envelope that had arrived. That morning, the contents confirmed what he'd feared. It was real. The Homeowners Association, with Eleanor Pierce at its helm-a-woman, who had spent the last year trying to micromanage. His every breath had hit him with a $50,000 fine. His eyes darted across the page, each sentence digging deeper into his gut. Violation of community standards. The offense. Not repainting the fence his father had built by hand half a century ago, a fading relic of tradition and grit. Worse still, the HOA was threatening foreclosure if payment wasn't made within 30 days. Henry's jaw tightened. The paper crackled in his fist. He'd seen this storm forming snide comments about the grass, complaints about the barn, constant pestering about his aging fence. At first, he let them pass, dismissing it as suburban noise. But this was different. This was an attack. 50 grand might as well have been $5 million to a retired widower surviving on a fixed income since Margaret passed away 2 years ago. But the real sting wasn't the money. It was the smug cruelty of Eleanor and her polished little regime. They'd pushed, poked, and prodded. Convinced he was just a worn-down man in a creaky house, was too tired to fight back. They were about to learn just how wrong they were, what they didn't know, what they'd never thought to ask. Was that Henry? Owned the only road into Cedar Hollow. For decades, the HOA had expanded and operated under the assumption that the 1.2-mile stretch of road, connecting them to the outside world, was theirs. It wasn't. When Henry's father sold most of the land to developers back in 1974, he kept that road a quiet act of foresight that left Henry with a trump card no one in Cedar Hollow saw coming. As dusk swallowed the horizon, Henry crumpled the letter and dropped it into the trash. No check, no compliance. He walked to his shed, where the tools of a lifetime gleamed under the amber sky. It was time to show the HOA who really ran things. Henry had lived a quiet, sturdy life in the house his father had built from the ground up. Born into a lineage of laborers and craftsmen, he'd grown up swinging hammers, repairing tractors, and learning civil engineering not from textbooks, but from tired men who taught through action. He married Margaret at 25, raised 2 daughters, and designed bridges for a living, bridges that still stood today, tough and unwavering. When Margaret died, silence filled the house. The barn where he once fixed engines became a sanctuary of memories. The fence, hand-carved and sun-bleached, stood as a boundary between him and a world that had moved on. He was content with his tomatoes, his birds, his quiet. Then Eleanor arrived, clipboard in hand and superiority in her tone. The first letter had come months ago. Please repaint your fence. It no longer meets the HOA's aesthetic standards. Henry had laughed. Who did she think she was to judge his father's craftsmanship? But more letters followed. Then fines. $204, tall grass. $500 for an outdated mailbox. $1,000 for a tree limb hanging over the walk. It wasn't about orderette. It was about domination. Eleanor didn't want beauty. She wanted obedience. Henry refused. He'd never joined the HOA, never signed their rules. His land predated the bylaws. But this $50,000 fine and the foreclosure threat, that was a declaration. They think I'm beaten, he muttered one evening. They've got no damn clue. From an old filing cabinet, he retrieved the deed to the road. The original 1974 agreement and detailed maps and plats. Then he called Thomas Reed, a lawyer and one-time student of his from his teaching days. They've driven over my road for 40 years, Henry said, sliding the papers across the table. Right, time to show them what it's cost. Thomas grinned. There. And for one hell of a surprise, as Thomas drew up filings, Henry prepared for a different kind of battle. He'd never enjoyed conflict, but he'd never run from it either. Eleanor kept pushing. One afternoon, a black SUV pulled up. 2 HOA enforcers stepped out in imitation in discount uniforms. Mr. Mason, the taller one, said smugly, "We're here to inspect your violations." Henry met their eyes, rake in hand. "Get off my land," the man sneered. You'll wish you hadn't said that. The next day, HOA workers showed up without notice, ripping down part of the fence. Calling it unsafe, Henry photographed the splintered remains and called Thomas. But the next blow came harder. His dog Bella, a golden retriever he'd rescued after Margaret died, vanished one night. He searched until sunrise, shouting her name into the trees. A neighbor found her locked in a van with other missing pets. No proof, but Henry didn't need it. He knew who was behind it. Then came the final insult. A utility truck arrived to cut off his power and water, till you comply, the crew chief said. Henry marched to the back shed, grabbed a wrench, and disconnected everything himself, locking down the lines. Now get off my property, he said. They left. The message was clear. Eleanor would stop at nothing. Cedar Hollow fractured. Some neighbors stood with Henry, tired of the HOA's tyranny. Others clung to Eleanor's perfect vision of control. She called an emergency meeting to cement her grip. But Henry was already a step ahead. He organized his documents, worked with Thomas, and planned his strike. The night of the meeting, the community center buzzed with tension. Eleanor stood poised, all confidence and cold authority. Henry arrived early, sitting quietly at the back with a worn leather satchel. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor began. "Mr. Mason has repeatedly violated our rules and refused to cooperate. It's time to discuss legal proceedings." Murmurs stirred. Henry rose, slow and steady. "You're all missing something." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "This isn't your turn to speak. I own the road," Henry said. "It's the only way in or out of Cedar Hollow." Gasps broke the room's rhythm. Henry walked to the front and laid down the documents. "In 1974, my father kept the road. When he sold the land, it's private. Always has been. I let you use it for free. That stops today." Eleanor's voice cracked. This can't be." Henry raised the deed. "It is. I've filed an injunction. Your fine is void. I owe you nothing. You mess with me again, I close the road for good." A long silence followed. Then Clara Evans stood up. "He's right. I've lived here decades. I'm with Henry." More stood. Sam, Lydia, a rising wave of support. Eleanor tried to regain control, but her voice faltered. The room had shifted. The next morning, Henry posted a sign, "Private road. Access suspended. Contact H. Mason." Cars lined up. School buses stalled. Delivery trucks idled. Chaos ensued. Eleanor called. "We need to negotiate," she said. "Talk to my lawyer," Henry replied. At mediation, Henry laid out terms. Cancel the fine. Eleanor resigns and apologizes publicly. The HOA is dissolved, replaced with a resident council, and the road leased for $1 a year. Eleanor balked. The community didn't. They forced her hand. At a final meeting, Eleanor stood in defeat. "I apologize to Mr. Mason and the residents of Cedar Hollow. I resign." No one clapped. Henry tipped his hat and walked out. Peace returned, anew. Council formed. No fines, no threats. Just neighbors. Henry reopened the road, framed the lease above his father's toolbox, rebuilt the fence himself, carving into the wood, built by my father, protected by his son. Clara brought peach cobbler. "You showed them," she smiled. "Sometimes you don't need to shout," Henry said. "Just stand your ground." Kids came to his shed to learn woodworking. Eleanor sold her home and left. Her rule ended. Cedar Hollow bloomed, free and unburdened, and Henry Mason's quiet legacy lived on. Do like, comment for more stories?